The lake had always been Thomas Mitchell's sanctuary, after months away helping another county. He finally returned to his quiet cabin, expecting nothing more than peace and fresh mountain air. Instead, something immediately felt wrong. Fresh HOA notices had been nailed to trees standing on his own property. Someone had marked private land as if they owned it. Thomas quietly removed one notice and folded it into his pocket. Before Thomas reached the porch, a luxury SUV rolled into the driveway. Barbara Lawson and her son Kyle stepped out as if they already owned the property. Neither of them asked permission. Barbara pointed toward the cabin and declared that the HOA had reassigned the property for community use. Thomas simply smiled, saying almost nothing. Kyle walked straight toward the front porch carrying a duffel bag, convinced he would be living there by sunset. Thomas never moved to stop him. Kyle shoved the cabin door open without permission, expecting to claim the place immediately. Instead, he froze when he noticed framed police awards, commendations, and decades of service displayed neatly across the living room walls. Barbara dismissed the decorations with a laugh, insisting they meant nothing. She ordered Kyle to start unloading his belongings while she called the HOA board to celebrate their victory. Thomas quietly reached into his truck and removed a small leather badge wallet. He slipped it into his jacket pocket without saying a word, already knowing exactly how the situation would end. Curious neighbors gathered near the driveway. After hearing the argument, they whispered among themselves, wondering why the quiet cabin owner seemed completely unconcerned despite Barbara's loud demands. The distant sound of approaching sirens echoed across the lake. Barbara smiled confidently, convinced the police were coming to remove Thomas from her property. Completely unaware of who they were actually coming to meet, two patrol SUVs rolled to a stop outside the cabin. The officers stepped out professionally, scanning the situation before looking toward Thomas with immediate recognition. One officer walked straight past Barbara without saying a word. He stopped in front of Thomas, smiled respectfully, and greeted him with a firm handshake. Barbara interrupted loudly, demanding the officers remove Thomas from HOA property. The officers exchanged puzzled glances before turning back toward Thomas. Without raising his voice, Thomas opened the leather badge wallet he had carried all along. His official chief of police credentials were clearly visible. Silence fell across the driveway. Kyle's confidence disappeared instantly. Barbara's smile faded as she realized the quiet cabin owner had never been an ordinary homeowner. One officer politely explained that the property records confirmed Thomas as the lawful owner. The HOA had no authority over his private lake cabin. Barbara insisted there had to be a mistake. She pulled out HOA paperwork, but every page failed to match the county property records. The gathered neighbors quietly nodded as the truth became clear. Many admitted they had questioned the HOA's actions for months but had been afraid to speak up. Kyle slowly carried every box back to the SUV. The confidence he arrived with had completely disappeared. Barbara stood silently beside the vehicle. As the police prepared to leave, one officer smiled at Thomas and thanked him for his years of service. The quiet lake finally returned to the peaceful place it had always been. The patrol vehicles disappeared down the lakeside road, leaving the property quiet once again. Thomas took a deep breath, believing the ordeal was finally over. One elderly neighbor slowly approached Thomas and admitted that several homeowners had received similar HOA threats over the past year. Most had been too intimidated to challenge them. Thomas invited the neighbors onto the porch for coffee. Together, they compared letters, notices, and photographs documenting months of questionable HOA actions. As the evidence grew, it became clear that Barbara had repeatedly claimed authority over properties that were never included in the HOA. The neighbors were stunned. The following morning, county officials arrived to review the property boundaries. Every survey marker confirmed exactly what Thomas had known all along. Barbara drove past the cabin one final time, seeing the survey crews and county officials. She quietly continued down the road without stopping. The neighbors thanked Thomas for standing his ground. His calm response had inspired others to protect their own property rights through proper legal channels. That evening, Thomas sat quietly on the cabin porch, watching the sun disappear. Beyond the lake, the peace he had come home for had finally returned. Looking back, Thomas realized the confrontation had never been about anger. It had been about remaining patient, knowing the facts, and allowing the truth to speak for itself. Some people believe confidence comes from speaking the loudest, but real confidence comes from knowing the truth and staying calm when it matters most. HOA Drama Neighbor.